Okay, now we're going to focus on the arms race and some communist advances. After World War II, of course, one of our biggest secrets was the fact that we had an atomic bomb that nobody else had. Okay, so the Soviets quickly begin their race to develop a weapon much like ours. And there was a couple named the Rosenbergs, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. They lived in New York City. They were communist sympathizers, and they actually gave the secret of the atomic bomb to the Soviets through a chain of spy networks and so forth, and they gave important missing information that the Soviets needed in order to create their first atomic bomb. So in 1946, they test their first successful atomic bomb. This is only 1 year after we used it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So we no longer have the advantage, which means we need to then go to something even bigger. And we build what is known as the hydrogen or thermonuclear bomb in 1950, which is much, much bigger. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, the hydrogen bomb in more detail in a little bit. We'll go back to that, but it is an amazing bomb, and we'll watch it and we'll talk about it and talk about the advantage that we had over that for also a very short amount of time. But we're going to go back and forth as far as weapons go for throughout the Cold War, and this is going to be called an arms race. We're going to build new technology, and then they're going to build new technology. And this includes things like the space race, trying to get to the moon first, who can get there, who can create the biggest, the baddest technology, sort of a battle of ideologies, if you will. Again, while we're not fighting direct wars, we're fighting war in a less non-invasive way, but certainly could lead to potential nastiness. If we ever did go to war, we could be talking about nuclear war. So that's really important that we understand that, because we build these more advanced weapons, and while we're not killing each other directly at the moment, we could, and if we did, it would be a pretty severe thing. So part of what kept us from going to war directly with each other is this threat of a nuclear holocaust. Because if we did go to war, we could throw a nuke at them, and they could throw nukes back at us, and nobody wants that. I mean, because if you're using nuclear weapons, you're talking about wiping off the face of the earth, countries, and that's not something that we want to do. So it helped us to keep the Cold War cold in a way, because nobody wants this nuclear holocaust. I mean, if you've noticed, we've had this weapon since 1945, and we have not used it in war yet. Okay, and lots of countries have nuclear ability at this point, but we don't use them because nobody wants that. It holds war off in some regards. So in that way, I guess it's good, but we really don't want our enemies to have the same kind of weapons that we do, because that would be bad. Okay. Now, communism in China. This is one of our policies of containment that does not work very well. I have a good assignment for communism in China. It is at school, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to get access to it or not. If I can get into the building at all, we might still be able to do that assignment, but it goes into quite a bit of detail about how communism comes to China. But basically, in a nutshell here, for our note's sake, we'll keep this brief, but there are two factions in China. One is under a guy named Kai-shek, who the United States supports through basically just through economic support. We don't actually ever go into China, but we give them some weapons, and we give them our economic support, and throw our weight behind a guy named Kai-shek. Now, Kai-shek is not really a great guy, but given the alternative, who is Mao Zedong, who is pushing communism into China and who is taking money and support from the Soviets. So this is a very big deal that they are taking money and support from the Soviets, so they have backing. and Mao Zedong eventually will be able to take control of China. And again, we'll go into more detail about what what communism was like in China under Mao Zedong, but he is one of the biggest and baddest and worst dictators of all times. China basically becomes this big disaster under communism. Lots of starving people as they try to implement pure Marxist ideas. Everybody, feeding off the same garden, and it's crazy pure communist stuff that they attempted. And we all know that pure communism does not work. China is still communist today. However, they're not communist economically. They can't be. We know that there's free enterprise in China, even though that the communist government does maintain strong control over that. Okay. However, communism under Mao Zedong, where he tried, people were murdered and killed and millions died and starved to death under their, failed economic systems. But this is a major leak in our container of trying communism to spread. So not so successful in keeping communism out of China, okay, or in other Asian countries, as we will learn as we get to North Korea, Vietnam. These are countries that we are not going to be able to keep communism from leaking into. Okay, so our biggest takeaway here from this is that the biggest takeaway from all of this is that our policy of containment was successful in Western Europe. Okay, we were able to stop the spread of communism through the Truman Doctrine, through the Marshall Plan, the Berlin Airlift. Those were all very successful policies of containment in Western Europe. However, not so successful in Asia. Okay, so we're going to see some falls there. And again, we'll get more into talking about China, a little bit more into talking about the Korean War, obviously, Vietnam. These are things we need to cover yet, but not so successful in those policies of containment. Okay, I'm going to play you guys a video called Duck and Cover, and it is pretty silly. But I think it'll show you how we felt in the United States and how that fear of the communists having nuclear weapons really put fear into our country. And this was real propaganda that was put into place in the United States. I think you will get a kick out of it. And then there are some questions for Duck and Cover at the end of this that will be posted that I will have you guys respond to. But that will be the end of today's assignment. I hope you have a great day, and I will be checking in with you this week.